Finally tonight, while President Trump was in Kansas City today, he invited a 94-year-old World War II veteran on the stage, and it was a classic moment.
He's only 94, and the Secret Service made him walk about 100 yards out of his way, but that's okay. I just want to tell you a few things, may I, yes. Mr. President? I've got time. Hopefully, that you will allow me to bring my family into the Oval Office to meet you. I started to get a little bit concerned when he was finishing.
You have to say yes to that invite, and he did. He invited anybody, really. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That is it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. The story hosted by my friend Martha MacCallum. Start right now. 94, Martha.
Yeah, do not say no to that man. That would be a bad move.
Yes is the answer.
Thank you, Brett. Good to see you tonight. Breaking this evening, the president, as you know, says that Mueller, Comey, and company are pursuing a witch hunt against him. And Patty Blagojevich, the wife of the former governor of Illinois, says she agrees with that. In fact, she claims that the same team did the same thing to her husband, who, as I said, was then the governor of Illinois, who went to prison in part for saying this about his power as governor to pick a Senate replacement for then Senator Barack Obama.
I've got this thing, and it's golden, and I'm just not giving it up for nothing.
You can forget that, right? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to The Story. I'm Martha MacCallum. In her first ever op-ed, which came out today, Patty Blagojevich writes this: little did we know how truly corrupt the Obama-era Justice Department and FBI really were. With pre-dawn raids, overzealous prosecutors, and a flair for big flashy press conferences, we have learned the hard way how some prosecutors have weaponized their unchecked power to criminalize the routine practices of politics and government. She joins me now exclusively tonight. Good to see you once again, Patty. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
So, you know, the Chicago Tribune has an op-ed that is pushing back. They're saying that you are revising history somewhat in this op-ed. Are they right about that in terms of the timeline? They say, you know, President Obama wasn't even in office when this happened to your husband. And they also say that the claim that the charge about selling the Senate seat was overturned is not exactly accurate. So how do you respond to that?
Well, it's true that it was under the Bush administration that when my husband was arrested in December, but it was the Obama administration that and their Justice Department that made absolutely sure that my husband didn't get anywhere close to a fair trial. They suppressed evidence. They lied to the jury in their closing arguments. They made sure that our evidence, those wiretaps that were so famous, that we didn't. Our wiretaps never even saw the light of day. So it was the Obama Justice Department, and it's the same people that were held over from the Bush Justice Department that made sure that we didn't get a fair trial.
So let me ask you this, because President Trump did bring up a while back on Air Force One the suggestion that, you know, he felt that maybe your husband was his case was handled unjustly and that he had some sympathy for that. Is that getting anywhere? Have you heard any more about the potential for a pardon from the president?
I haven't heard anything at all. We are so grateful for the president to even be thinking about us in that respect. He's given our family a tremendous amount of hope, and we're confident that the president's going to do what he thinks is right regarding that. We are, we say our prayers every night and hopefully look forward to the day that my husband gets home. But this whole thing that's happening this weekend is just so familiar to me. I can't believe these people are at it again. They use, whether it's using false information to obtain, warrants or turning, trusted advisors into spies against you. It's like almost like I'm reliving it all over again.
When you talk about this weekend, you're talking about Paul Manafort?
I'm talking about like the latest revelations about how the FISA court and how that they used slander was essentially opposition research slander against the president to spy on him, and just like the allegation that they used against my husband to get 6 wiretaps on all of our phone lines was the evidence that they supposedly used was that my husband was going to be doing a lot of fundraising before the end of the year. This was the allegation. So if that doesn't strike terror into the hearts of any American, that they can allege that you're going to fundraise, and that's the reason to wiretap you. I don't know who would feel safe.
What about your suggestion that that the charge about selling the Senate seat, which we played in the beginning, and I know that you say there was a lot of other evidence that you feel should have been submitted on your husband's behalf, and that you feel that it was wrong that it wasn't, but that it was not overturned, that the charge with relation to that, and you say that in the op-ed. Do you want to clarify that?
Sure. The charges, the appellate court overturned 5 charges relating to this political log rolling that my husband was accused of, saying, well, do you think if I give the president who he wants for the Senate seat, he might appoint me to be Director of Health and Human Services? Those kind of things were totally overturned as perfectly legal politics. All that remains of our case are 3 fundraising allegations that, it's fundraising. My husband's actually the only politician in the history of the United States that's in prison for fundraising.
I know you say that you look at Bob McDonald's case and Bob Menendez's case, and you feel that your husband, that what they did was more egregious than what he did, and that politics came into play. How so?
Well, with Senator Menendez, he was given the jury instructions that we wanted in our case. If we were given the same law that he was given in his trial, my husband would be a free man today. But the court played politics, and they had to bury my husband so deep that he could never come out and protest. I mean, they gave him a 14-year sentence for asking for campaign contributions, essentially.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
I'm just curious. It seems to me that one of the strongest arguments that you have, and I know, you go back into the case and talk about the way the jury instructions and all of that, which is very interesting, is the length of the sentence. Is that something that you're pursuing with the White House in terms of a possible pardon for him, to say that the time served is enough? He's missed so much time with his 2 daughters growing up, and he will never get that back.
Oh, absolutely. My older daughter just graduated from college. She's heading off to graduate school. My younger daughter is, learning how to drive, and as I'm sitting there next to her in the passenger seat, I'm thinking this is a job for her father. He should be sitting here next to her, teaching her how to drive. And these are moments that we'll never get back. Rod's sentence is at least double that of any other elected official up until that point, and it's outrageous for what the charges are. Even if you take the charges for face value and believe somehow that it was a fair trial and that it's just, that sentence is so out of line from anything in the history of the United States.
Well, we will see where it goes. Patty, thank you very much. Good to have you here tonight, and we'll be watching it very closely. Our thanks to you. Let's bring in Mark Thiessen, American Enterprise Institute scholar, and Charlie Hurt, political columnist for the Washington Times. Both are Fox News contributors. Juan Williams is here as well, co-host of The Five and a Fox News political analyst. So, obviously, Patty Blagojevich wants this. She wants to get her husband out of prison, and who can blame her? He has missed a lot of time at home with their family. Mark, what do you make of her argument, though, and the fact that she is making it analogous in some ways to what she sees happening now, and she believes that it was politically motivated in terms of the length of time of that sentence?
Yeah, well, first of all, your heart breaks for her and for her family and for her kids, because they didn't do anything wrong. And they've lost their dad to a long prison term and a husband to a long prison term. So they're doing their best to try and figure out a way to get their husband back and father back, and that's completely understandable. However, their case has no legal merit. He was convicted of 18 counts. 13 were upheld on appeal. The 5 that were dismissed were because of bad jury instructions on a technicality. He was convicted of wire fraud, attempting to solicit bribes, and not just in the case of the Obama Senate seat. He was convicted of extorting a children's hospital for a $50,000 contribution in order to release money to them. He was convicted of extorting racetrack owners before he refusing to sign legislation for racetracks. So there's a lot of stuff that was going on here. This was not just one case. It was a pattern of extortion. And so they've lost all their appeals, and they have no choice but to get a commutation from the president. That's their only hope. And so what they're doing is they're playing the Comey card. They're playing the Mueller card to make their case.
And exactly, and you make excellent points about, he was impeached overwhelmingly by the Illinois House and Senate as well. I think the only person who voted not to impeach him was his wife's sister, who was serving in the House. So, it's good she stuck up for him. But Charlie, I do think that there's a legitimate claim in terms of the time served. And when you do look at Bob Menendez and Bob McDonnell in Virginia, and you look at those cases, there are a lot of similarities, and they got off much easier.
Sure, there's a great argument there in terms of the amount of time, because basically the courts have been sort of moot on the issue of what exactly is political corruption, and this is a major constitutional issue, and the reason is because there are a lot of skeezy politicians out there that do skeezy things. And exactly. We don't like that, and we want to do something to curb that. But of course, there's something more terrifying than a skeezy politician, and that is prosecutors that are that pursue politicians, professional prosecutors who pursue professional politicians, and we don't really understand everything that's going on, and we don't understand, are they politically motivated or are they not? And that's where I think that she raises a lot of interesting points at a time where we ought to be thinking about these sorts of things from the beginning. The reason the investigation into the Trump campaign and into those around Donald Trump is so alarming, the reason it's a major constitutional question is for exactly the reasons that she enunciated, even though they may not be the best case for this. But the idea that you would have these, witch hunts that Donald Trump calls, but these investigations into politicians, and the only politician I've ever known who got off completely scot-free or got some advantage out of it was the Clintons.
Well, Juan, he makes a good point. In my mind, Juan, you look at this, and you do obviously have sympathy for Patty Blagojevich and for her daughters. And you do have to be circumspect about both sides of the equation, right? You have to look at the potential crime, and in this case, he was convicted on several counts, as we have pointed out several times here. You also have to look at the investigators, and you have to say, is it politically motivated? Because what we want is justice in this country, and people to have a comfort level that they're getting a fair shake when they're charged with something.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that, but I also think that you have to be fair to the idea that law enforcement has to hold the line against politicians who have power over budgets, who have power over contracts, who have power over appointments like Governor Blagojevich. And so I think what Patty Blagojevich is doing, and I totally feel for her, losing a husband and a father for that time. But I think what she's doing is trying to appeal to Donald Trump even here tonight and to make the case to President Trump, hey, we have a problem similar to yours. If you have a grudge against law enforcement, if you see law enforcement as excessive in the use of their powers and abusive, then guess what? I'm the perfect case for you to use. And we know that President Trump has pardoned Joe Arpaio, right? Mm-hmm. President Trump has gone out of his way to pardon Dinesh D'Souza, right? Fellow conservatives, if you will, especially Arpaio on the immigration issue. He's gone out of his way even to pardon Scooter Libby. And again, in every case, it seems like he's sending a message.
What about Mark Rich? I mean, you can. Obama and Bush, hundreds of pardons when you look back at the list, hundreds of them. And in many cases, it's just a question of believing that there should be, some forgiveness for time served. And I don't think there's any question that there were laws broken here. And I'm not, and you're absolutely right. I mean, Patty Blagojevich is hoping to catch the attention of the president with this op-ed that she wrote. And she's raised these questions. We'll see if she gets anywhere. But we got to leave it there, you guys. Thank you very much. Great to see all of you tonight.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys. So here is a question for you. Totally different subject. And Juan, I want you to weigh in on this. Have you tried to get a plastic straw in your Coke or your cocktail lately?
I brought myself a marine-friendly straw, and I'm going to show you how it works.
John Stossel here to explain why plastic straws are disappearing. It's really hard to find them when you go out somewhere. And fighting back against the movement behind paper, even pasta with a hole in the middle has been offered as a straw, and bamboo that's being pushed on you. Also, coming up this evening on a much more serious note, the untold story of American hostage Otto Warmbier, held captive in North Korea. Tonight, a new theory about what really happened when one of the negotiators joins me next.
Otto did not die in vain. He had a lot to do with us being here today. New images just today show that North Korea has begun the process of dismantling a key missile site, and we appreciate that. We had a fantastic meeting with Chairman Kim, and it seems to be going very well.
Some encouraging news from North Korea today, as new satellite images reportedly show some of its missile launch sites are being dismantled as part of the president's deal to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. So if this is true, this represents a glimmer of hope for the White House amidst some rocky negotiations that began in secret during the early days of the 2016 election. And tonight, we are getting a closer look at one part of how the Trump-Kim negotiations found their beginnings in an American tragedy that is detailed in a deeply researched new story in GQ magazine. It is called The Untold Story of Otto Warmbier. It digs into the secret talks that took place to bring the American college student home, describing what happened to Otto as, quote, even more shocking than anyone knew. Trace Gallagher is live in our West Coast newsroom tonight with the story. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Martha. GQ is reporting that in June of last year, President Trump signed off on a secret mission to send a plane load of diplomats and doctors into North Korea to bring Otto Warmbier home. The article says Mr. Trump told then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to, quote, take care of Otto. But at the time, it was also known that Warmbier, who'd been held for 15 months, was unconscious. His parents were told by their home state of Ohio Senator Rob Portman that their son had brain damage, yet they held out hope that he was in a medically induced coma. That hope faded when the plane carrying their son arrived back in Cincinnati, and they saw him strapped to a stretcher, jerking violently and howling. Doctors still don't know what caused the injuries, but there was talk of torture and coercion, as evidenced by Warmbier's confession statement in February 2016. Watch.
I have been very impressed by the Korean government's humanitarian treatment of severe criminals like myself.
Later, the New York Times cited anonymous sources claiming U.S. intelligence reports indicate Warmbier was repeatedly beaten by North Korea. The torture theory was then embraced by President Trump and Otto Warmbier's parents.
He was blind. He was deaf. As we looked at him and tried to comfort him, it looked like someone had taken a pair of pliers and rearranged his bottom teeth.
But a day later, the Hamilton County, Ohio coroner contradicted the Warmbier statement, saying she found no signs of trauma to the teeth and no obvious sign of torture. But she also confirmed there was brain damage. Here she is.
There's a couple of ways that you can get that. So you either have to discontinue blood flow to the brain or stop breathing. And what caused either one of those possible events, we wouldn't know. I mean, could that have been torture at the time? We don't know.
The writer of the GQ piece says he spoke to a dozen experts and only one thought there was any remote possibility that Warmbier was tortured. And today, when Fox News asked the State Department if Warmbier was in fact tortured, we were told only that the administration holds North Korea accountable for Otto Warmbier's unjust imprisonment. Warmbier's parents have not yet commented on the GQ article. Martha.
Well, there's no doubt about it that they are accountable for what happened to him when he was in their custody. That's to be sure. Trace, thank you very much. So here now, a man who is mentioned quite a bit in this story. He was a crucial part of the secret negotiations with North Korea. Mickey Bergman, executive director of the Richardson Center for Global Engagement, has worked on these kinds of cases for years, bringing back hostages. Mickey, thank you very much for being here. First of all, your reaction to the suggestions in this story.
Well, I think the story is thorough, it's deep, it takes into account a lot of different interviews. Governor Richardson and myself were interviewed by the reporter several times, and I think the reporter did a good job. There's parts of all of this that none of us know, and I think you just touched on it in your coverage. There's no doubt, and I got a chance to see Otto when he came back to Ohio, of the damage that he had, but as we heard, we don't know exactly what caused it, and I think Fred and Cindy, his parents, know everything that they need to know. The North Koreans killed their son, and they're looking for accountability, and there should be accountability. And it's a tragedy. And at the same time, I also want to remind you that what happened to Otto is the exception to other cases that we've seen in North Korea. I was on your show a few months ago when we welcomed back 3 other Americans coming back, and they were healthy. There's a lot of mystery around what happened over there.
It's very clear that he was under mental duress, and how could he not be? He's a young man with his whole future ahead of him, who, according to them, took some piece of propaganda to bring home as a souvenir, and then saw his entire life end. He was going to be there for the foreseeable future, 15 years, and there's a suggestion in here that may have led possibly to something that led to, oxygen being cut off to his brain, and even the suggestion that he may have tried to take his own life. His parents have not responded to this story. They do not believe that is the case in any way. But even if that were the story, what is still clear is that doing this kind, and you say that what they routinely do is put them in a room, question them for sometimes 15 hours on end, and mental torture is absolutely part of the equation in all these cases.
Correct. And especially when you think about Otto being there, we know what was happening here. We know that there was a movement, that there was an attempt to get him. We don't know that he knew any of it. It is possible for somebody in isolation like that to be told many things that can be really devastating. Anywhere from, I know it might sound not so serious, but for somebody saying, hey, your parents don't care about you. Your parents admitted your fault. Your government is shying away from all those things. When they're repeated at you and you have no outlet, can get to you. So there's, again, what the exact cause of his condition, I think we are not going to find out, but the overall responsibility and accountability for his health, no matter how it took place, was the North Korean government, and I think that's the important thing for Fred and Cindy.
It's hard to imagine something that would be more torturing to a child than to hear that your parents don't care about you. I mean, that is that would be absolutely devastating to this young man or to anyone else. In terms of what we're seeing now, the dismantling of this facility and their nuclear operations, how optimistic are you that they want to move forward with this dismantling? What do you think is going on?
I think what we saw today, the images, is a very good sign. It means that Secretary Pompeo managed to get back on track after a bumpy visit he had. And I think what's important for us to understand that we're looking at the timing of position, at the period of positioning by both sides. The summit last month was very good. It allowed the two leaders to meet, but it did not produce a workable framework, which was the task of Secretary Pompeo since. And so when Secretary Pompeo meets harsh language when he visits North Korea, that's the North Koreans' positioning. When Secretary Pompeo goes to the UN, as he did last week, to reinstate maximum pressure, that's the U.S. positioning. So we're going to see this. It's going to be bumpy, and we need to remember not to cry all is lost every time there is a setback, and not to celebrate mission accomplished every time we have a step forward. This is going to be a long and bumpy road ahead.
As you've said often, when the North Koreans say no, they mean not yet. And you found that in your negotiations over the years and working with them closely in something called the New York Channel here in New York, which I thought was fascinating as part of the story. Mickey, thank you very much. Great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
So still to come this evening, wow, from America's dad to America's newest sex offender. He is being categorized that way by the state of Pennsylvania. His people are fighting back. The shocking news story about Bill Cosby. And Republicans slammed the president for extending a lifeline to farmers who are hard hit by his tariffs. The Secretary of Agriculture joins us here to respond to that criticism coming up in a moment. And one of the real-life farmers on whether or not the White House response is good enough when we come back. Developing tonight, President Trump is now offering to help American farmers caught up in the escalating trade war with China. $12 billion in aid will go to farmers whose harvests have been hurt by the tariffs. Kendall Culp is the Indiana farmer, has been for 40 years, and raises soybeans, corn, wheat, beef, cattle, and hogs. He's also vice president of Indiana Farm Bureau and on the board of directors for the American Soybean Association, so he knows whereof he speaks. Kendall, good to see you tonight. Thank you very much for being here. The $12 billion, how does that go over with you?
Well, obviously, we appreciate the president having our backs as farmers, and he said that he would do that as this trade issue has continued on. He said he would be supporting of us, and well, we appreciate that. Obviously, we would just like to have a deal done. Would be what we would really like to see done in the long run.
What kind of deal? You want to see NAFTA? You want to see TPP put back on the table?
Well, obviously NAFTA is what needs to happen first. NAFTA is really very important to the agriculture economy, not only to Indiana, but all farmers in the United States. You know, there are both of those are top 5 trading partners for the United States. A lot of corn, a lot of soybeans, a lot of meat products are exported to both of those countries. And I think what we're being told is that would be the model. And so we would like to see NAFTA done so we can continue to see trade agreements with other countries. That's what the administration said they preferred. Instead of larger multilateral trade agreements, they would rather see unilateral or bilateral trade agreements. And so we're anxious to see those take place so our commodities continue to flow to these other countries.
I mean, obviously the president's very concerned about people in your situation and generally part of his base. And he does not want to lose your support. And here's one of the tweets that he put out today. Tariffs are the greatest. Either a country which has treated the United States unfairly on trade negotiations negotiates a fair deal, or it gets hit with tariffs. It's as simple as that. And everybody's talking. Remember, we are the piggy bank that is being robbed. All will be great. And earlier today he said, you got to stick it out. You got to fight. Nobody else fought it. So he's essentially asking for your patience and saying that in the end it will pay off for you. Do you believe that?
Well, I think farmers all along have been very supportive of the administration. Secretary Perdue has said multiple times, as farmers, if we raise the commodities and the crops, the government will find a home for those and will sell those for us. And so we believe that. We want to actually, we want to see that take place and happen. Farmers are free trade people. We want free trade. We want fair trade. We want open markets. We're overproducers in this country. The U.S. farmers are. And so we produce way more than what the American citizens can consume. So we have to have a market and export those for our market around the world. 95% of the population lives outside of the United States. Right. And so it's important that our goods get to those people.
I got to go, but before I let you go, do you think it will change anyone's vote or support in your group for the president? Is that in danger?
They're still patient right now. We're a ways here in the Midwest. We're a little ways from harvest. We're a couple months away yet. Mm-hmm. If this drags on and we get past harvest and our bins are full and we have a good crop and we have poor market prices, then I think you're going to see more farmers saying that we need to have this deal done quickly. Yeah. All right, Kendall. Thank you very much, Kendall Culp. Good to speak with you tonight, sir. Here now for a story exclusive to answer to those questions, Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue. Sir, welcome. Very good to have you with us tonight. Well, what's your response to Mr. Culp?
Well, I think, again, he's a farmer, and our farmers are real patriots. There's not a farmer in this country that would not rather have a good crop at a fair price than a government check. But when we have trade disruptions that we have now, we believe illegal retaliatory tariffs against our farmers, then they need some help. And that's exactly what the president has promised, and that's what he's delivered. Our farmers, if there were open trade around the world, they would benefit greatly. And that's what we would like to see. There have been non-tariff barriers for years, and China has cheated ever since she got in the WTO. So this is what the president is, the first one to call them on it, and that's what we need, is someone to play fair.
So, I mean, in terms of China and many other countries, they have the ability to manipulate their currency. They can manipulate their markets to a great extent. They can offset some of these tariffs. Is this, sort of the administration's way of trying to offset while obviously keeping within the rules that we have as a country?
It is. It's a temporary measure until we can get these trade disruptions resolved. The president wants trade more than anyone. He wants free and fair trade. Even our allies at the EU have non-tariff barriers that are damaging to our farmers. Our farmers are the most competitive in the world. If you turn them loose with reciprocal trades, they can outcompete anyone in the world, and that's why we face these unfair trade practices from around the world.
But let me ask you something, because there's a lot of effort and a lot of discussion today about carve-outs, about exceptions for certain industries, and that's a dangerous road to go down, because next thing you know, you're carving out everybody who is, lobbying and pushing hard to be the one who gets that exception.
Our farmers provide national food security, which is actually national security, just like our defense. If we don't have enough to eat, this country is in an amazing situation that's not very helpful. And that's why the president understands how important the farmers are to the economy, and the farmers are important to our national security.
All right, so I'm hearing you're going to protect them, and we will see how it all works out. Agriculture Secretary Senator Perdue, thank you, sir. Good to have you on the show tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you,
You bet. So coming up next, John Stossel is standing by with a paper straw, and it's just a disaster. Will any of them live up to plastic? We're going to test it out, because you know this problem at home. I know you have witnessed this, and John's going to explain it to us. But first, he was once one of America's most beloved figures. Comedian Bill Cosby is now one step away from being labeled a sex offender for life in the state of Pennsylvania, and that might be the least of what he has coming to him ultimately. Governor Mike Huckabee with a big picture look at all of this. Role models, celebrity, expectations that we have for these people. All of that with the governor when we come back.
You really don't have to worry about cheese. You just... Stop. Hey! Stop. No, come on. Stop. Look, the two of you. Did you tell Denise she could go out on a date tonight?
Yes, I did.
Well, have you seen the boy?
Yes, I have.
Well, how ugly is he? And fathers are the geniuses of the house. We're the geniuses of the house because only a person as intelligent as we could fake such stupidity.
Those were the good times. A stunning fall from grace for Bill Cosby, once regarded as America's dad. Wrote a book on fatherhood, his Cosby Show, his stand-up acts, the fatherhood book, all considered to be a role model for people across the country until it all came crashing down with sexual assault convictions. And today, a Pennsylvania board recommended the 81-year-old, who is now under house arrest while he waits for sentencing, which could be 15 years long, while he's doing that at home, is declared potentially a sexually violent predator. That's under advisement in Pennsylvania right now. So if a judge approves it, it would mean he has to register with the police for life, undergo mandatory sex offender counseling once a month, and if he's released from prison, the neighbors would be alerted to his location. So how did this man get here? Joining me now, Mike Huckabee, former Arkansas governor and a Fox News contributor. It just occurred to me when I looked at this today, and we've all watched this story, Governor, as it has unraveled, but it just makes you question, who we hold up as role models and how this kind of person ends up with this kind of situation surrounding them. It's just so disheartening.
It's one of the saddest stories I think I've ever seen in my life. This entire episode reveals him as something totally opposite of what we believed him to be.
Yeah.
The people I feel most for are obviously the women that he took advantage of, whose lives were ruined by his predatory behavior. But I feel sorry for the country because he did a lot to change even the mind of people regarding race, because he played an upper middle class African-American father, extremely successful, great family, changed the whole view and made it so mainstream and took away a lot of stereotypical and racist roles for African-Americans up until that point. And all that's gone. it's tragic.
It is. And unfortunately, he joins people of all races who find themselves in this situation in the current world that we're living in. And you just realize that there are so many people who believe that pushing the lines with people and crossing the lines and getting people to do things that they don't want to do is far, far too frequent in this society in terms of, what they might see as sexual promiscuity, which is not, which is actually a violation of someone's freedom and liberty. But one of the things that you pointed out in what you sent over to me earlier is that the whole fatherhood issue and the fact that he at one point in his career was very committed and was actually ruffling a lot of feathers in terms of encouraging black fathers in this country to take responsibility and to not abandon your children and to make sure that they're raised in homes with two parents.
Well, and he pushed for strong education and accountability and responsibility. He made it very clear that nobody should go around saying, I'm a victim, because what you should do is take responsibility for your life, your actions. And in that, he was the iconic American dad. He gave us a picture that we didn't have really since Father Knows Best back in the 50s. So it was an incredible role. Bill Cosby owned the 80s on television. His show was #1 for 5 years that it was on the air and always in the top 20. And yet what we see, I think, from this, Martha, is that the people that we can look to as role models because of their public persona may be very different in private, and it gives us pause, but it shouldn't take away that the role he played is a role that fathers should seek to be. And I pray that that won't get destroyed.
Yeah, I think if you want to look for role models, you should look, I look to my dad, who's a fantastic father, and, maybe don't look at these celebrities. Look closer to home. Look for people who you know and who you trust and who really do create role models that we can all look up to, and I think everybody hopefully has somebody like that in their lives. I know your daughter feels like that about you, so you're a pretty good dad.
Thank you.
Good to see you tonight.
Let's hope we don't have many stories like this again, Martha. Thank you for having me tonight.
Absolutely, sometimes. Governor, thank you very much. Great to see you, as always. All right, the great showdown of the straw. We've been discussing this a lot lately at the story. How much it bothers us that you can't find plastic straws anymore. Now, some people think they're saving the environment by switching them out for paper, but John Stossel is really good at drilling down on this stuff, and he did just that. So he's going to tell you if you really have to worry about your plastic straw or not. Next.
Straws suck, and we are no longer going to allow for plastic straws here in San Francisco.
Their time has come and gone.
They're talking about straws. It's pretty serious stuff. San Francisco and New York, just two of the major U.S. cities, declaring a war on plastic straws. So what's behind this? And do the alternative straws that were being offered even work? John Stossel, author of No They Can't, Why Government Fails But Individuals Succeed. So this weekend, I was out, had a couple meals out, lunch, dinner, cocktail, everything. Came with a straw that eventually, in the hot sun, started falling apart in the middle of drinking it, and you can't even get to the bottom of it. So what's going on?
It's one more pointless environmental zealotry. We're going to ban straws because there's a lot of plastic in the ocean. It's a real problem. But almost all of it comes from Asia and Africa. Almost none of it from the United States. And banning these straws is going to make no difference. And what people are going to use instead are paper, which disintegrates,
which falls apart.
Drink. Or they want us to use reusable straws like this metal one or this plastic reusable one.
So wait, this metal one, you're supposed to carry this around in your purse, and then you're supposed to take it home and wash it out. And so wherever you go, it's very large, by the way. This is my straw. I have my own straw. That's what you're supposed to do?
Or Starbucks, we're giving up plastic straws. If they're going to use washable ones, do you really trust the fast food place to wash the straw?
No, absolutely not. So it started with a child who did a report that said that there were 500 million straws being used, but unfortunately he's 9 years old, and the number was wrong, and it just took off like wildfire, and everybody...
Because he was cute, and CNN put him on TV.
Yeah.
500... A 9-year-old kid, he called some straw companies and said, there are 500 million used, and many of them end up in the oceans. The real number is much lower, and the number from the United States is pretty small.
So San Francisco, where they have much
Seattle
bigger problem.
already banned.
Yeah, Seattle has no straws, so don't try to get a straw in Seattle. San Francisco, which, there's a Daily Wire piece today that talks about how they think ridiculous it is that San Francisco is considering banning straws, because it says the proposed ban comes at a time when San Francisco is currently experiencing a public health crisis, becoming a city whose sidewalks are frequently littered with urine, feces, and discarded syringes. A website that allows residents to request maintenance has received 16,000 complaints with the keyword feces in last week, okay? So that's the really disgusting problem that they have on their hands, but they are very excited that they have outlawed straws.
The environmental movement has been great. Catalytic converters on cars, scrubbers and smokestacks. The EPA has been wonderful.
Right.
But it should now stand for enough protection already, because now we're down to pointless things like straws.
Aren't you surprised how quickly it catches on? Like, it was like overnight.
Make
suddenly,
you feel good.
Yeah.
Somebody else is going to give up straws. Also, the substitutes cost more. And the environmental, it's just a penny or two, but if you're in business, that makes a difference.
Yeah, so you're drinking out of a paper straw, but it's stuck in a big plastic cup. Right? I don't know. I don't know where all this is going, but Tom Brady, who, as everyone knows I love, has also recommended that I give up my...
Even he fell for it.
He wants you to have one of these, so we'll see. John Stossel, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Can I keep this?
Yes.
We'll try it out. All right. Coming up next...
Paid for him.
The internet has proclaimed Senator Orrin Hatch dead, and he has something he wants to say about that coming up next.